Hi, I'm Steve Eichmann. I'm here at the High Museum with the Curator of Photography, Julian Cox. There's an exhibition opening on June 6th of Richard Misrach's work. Richard Misrach is most known for his Desert Cantos series and producing large format color work. Julian, you want to tell me a little bit about his work and what it means for it to be here at the High?
Well, Richard, as you mentioned, is very well known for his work in color photography, and you could consider him really a pioneer in large format color photography. He's been doing it since the early 80s, really. And this series that we're presenting here is called On the Beach. It was made beginning in 2002, just shortly after 9/11, and we can talk about how the events of 9/11 sort of were an inspiration for this body of work. But he produced it over 2 or 3 years, from about 2002 to 2005. And all of the pictures in this series were made in Hawaii from the very same hotel and 1 or 2 different balconies looking directly down onto the beach. And he created these works using a large format, tripod-mounted 8x10 camera. And the variation in the composition is simply the result of different adjustments to the angle or the perspective of the camera and lens looking down from the balcony onto the beach. So the pictures themselves are really horizonless. I mean, you're confronted in most of the works with either entirely the ocean, entirely the beach, or a combination of the two, but there's no larger context in which you view the work. So they're very highly concentrated compositions, and that's very much his intention, I think, in the work, to say something about the nature of the relationship of human beings to the grandeur and the immensity of nature.
So much of Misrach's work over the years has been about American landscape and about how America sees its own landscape. He was really transformative in the 1970s and 80s for how Americans view landscape. How do you think this work fits in with his kind of lineage?
It's a good question. I think it represents, in some senses, a kind of diversion or slight departure from the political intensity of the things he's done before. You referenced the Desert Cantos, which is, one of his strongest bodies of work, and very explicitly about the nature of environmental change and degradation in the Western landscape. And then for the High Museum, he did a wonderful commission for us in 2002, work made in Louisiana and Mississippi about environmental devastation in those 2 states. So that's a strong refrain in his work throughout his career. But I think with On the Beach, there's a slightly different tone of voice that's being presented in this work. I mentioned 9/11 before, and like many of us, I think, who are engaged with visual culture, he was very strongly impacted by those images of figures falling from the buildings on 9/11. And what that sense of a human being, literal impact that had on the individual viewer. And so some of that feeling is what he's looking for, I think, in this work. And so a number of the pictures in this series focus on sort of isolated individuals seeming to either emerge into the water or out of the water. So there's a kind of interesting emotional content to this work that's quite different, I think, than what you see in the other series that he's probably better known for.
A lot of the emotional content also seems to be carried by the simple fact that the pieces are so large. They're quite overwhelming, and for me, they seem to evoke an element of sublime that's both beautiful and kind of horrific and kind of awful, meaning full of awe at the same time. Is that kind of what you see in this series as well?
Yeah, that's very well put. I think the pictures in and of themselves are kind of spectacles of the like I said, the grandeur of nature. And I think that one of the things that Misrach has done so very well over his career is to be highly sensitive and attuned to the nature of photographic materials and maximizing his materials in such a way as to sort of push the intensity of the message of the work. And the scale of these pictures is something that is a huge part of the way that they communicate themselves to the viewer. And a lot of people who've seen this work have asked the simple question, these must have been prearranged. Are they not manipulated? I mean, how How could he choreograph these combinations of figures on the beach? And they're entirely made through the process of patiently waiting and watching from this sort of overhead vantage point, and waiting for the right combinations of figures to come into his pictures and produce the picture, produce the kind of composition and feeling that he's looking for. And what's interesting, in the body of work, I've only found a single figure that seems to be actually conscious of what he's doing. And in fact, we're standing right here in front of this picture, where you see a swimmer in the ocean, engaging the photographer directly, who's up on the balcony, probably underneath his dark cloth, with this large piece of equipment that looks quite out of place on the beach in Hawaii. And so, I think that part of the strategy of this work is the idea of the kind of silent observer of human behavior in this environment, which is idyllic and, as you intimated, sublime. But then there are these undercurrents there that say something more sinister or uneasy about the nature of our existence, on the planet.
How do you feel, being the curator of photography here at the High Museum, how do you feel about bringing this exhibit here to Atlanta? How do you think that this fits in with our community, and why have you brought the show here?
Well, the one reason why we're hosting the exhibition is that we have made a significant commitment to Richard Misrach's work insofar as how we've built our permanent collection. We have almost 60 pieces by him in the permanent collection, and so we've made a major commitment to him as an artist. We believe in his work, and so through hosting this exhibition, which, by the way, has traveled extensively across the country, it's been at major museums such as the Art Institute of Chicago, the National Gallery of Art, the Henry Art Gallery at University of Washington, Seattle, and now the High. We wanted to share work of this quality and this stature with our audience, with our community, and as you've seen this morning, we're presenting in conjunction with Monet's Water Lilies, a very selective and high-quality focus show of rare Monet water lily paintings from the sort of end of his career. And it's interesting because those paintings have some correlation with this body of work insofar as how they're all about the nature of perception and seeing. And I think that that's another aspect of Misrach's work in these large-scale photographs, is that he's creating a very specific kind of visual sensory experience that he's inviting the viewer to take part in when they stand in front of the pictures.